Hi all, this is Allmighty and welcome to this video. So today I'm going to have a video with a Karpov game, so haven't done that in a while, and following the last video where I featured the game from the Caracas tournament where Karpov won his first GM norm. Today we are in the still 1970, but in the USSR championship. Still, after that tournament, Karpov is trying to prove to his fellow chess players that he belongs to the top, to the elite. As he is steadily building up to it, he wants to participate in very strong tournaments. And the USSR Championship at that time is definitely a place to do so. A lot of people actually really hoping that Karpov is going to really prove himself in this tournament. And this is actually the reason why I chose this game, because this game essentially shows how Karpov played throughout this tournament. At this time, he is still young and not really experienced, but he is on his way to become one of the top chess players in the world. And on the other side, with white pieces, we have Viktor Korchnoi, who is 20 years older than Karpov and already an established player, very experienced and one of the top players in the USSR at that time. So a very nice game to show. So let me just show you what happened. We had an English opening, a symmetrical variation. So after c4, c5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and knight to c3, everything standard here, Karpov decided to go for a dubious variation. I wouldn't say pretty much in his style. He plays d5, and after pawn captures and knight captures, we see d4. Pawn captures and now queen captures, and after knight to c3 and queen to c3, he is in a setup where black essentially didn't do anything. Both of the C and D files are open, but not any kind of an advantage nor a blockade variation that you would expect from Karpov in order to slowly build up to have a better game. So let's see what happened next. After knight to c6, e4, so Korchnoi expands in the center, we have a6. Bishop to c4 and queen to a5. So Karpov goes again for the exchange, and this time he wants to exchange the queens. We have bishop to d2, queen captures on c3 and bishop captures on c3. So once again, white is much faster with the development and looks much better in this game. Now we have e6 and castles, and now rook to g8. So you cannot develop this bishop because bishop to g7 is a threat. So this is why rook to g8 was played. Rook from f to d1, and now b5, attacking this bishop. Bishop to d3 and f6. As you can see, Karpov is just slowly moving the pawns, not really developing the pieces, while on the other hand, Korchnoi has already developed all of his pieces and now is looking for a plan. So we have a4, this b5 pawn has been pushed, so it's time to challenge it, and now b4 is the only logical move. You don't want to give white an option to capture it, nor do you want to capture back, because rook to a4, the a file is open and this pawn will be captured eventually. So we have bishop to d4, and now Korchnoi actually with this move tells Karpov that he is ready to give up his bishop pair because essentially he knows he is in a better position. So we have knight captures and knight captures. Once again, Karpov goes for the exchange. Bishop to c5 and bishop to c4. Now Karpov gives up the bishop pair. Bishop captures on d4 and rook captures on d4. And once again, we are in a position where black just looks awful. And I mean, not awful, but not really that good. So Karpov didn't really do anything in this game but exchange pieces. And now we see king to e7. So now it's time to actually, the final time to connect the rooks and play this bishop either to d7 or b7. And now there was actually a chance to play e5 by Korchnoi, a temporary sacrifice of the pawn. So if black captures rook to e4, you will pick up this pawn and go for the weak e6 pawn. So that was an option, but Korchnoi played rook to d1, the other rook from a file in order to double up, so this is also a good move. We have rook to a7 and now b3. Stabilizing the queen side, but also having a light square bishop on your opponent's side, not a very good option, to say the least, because in the end you will have these pawns locked on the light squares because now Karpov plays a5, and this could be considered a weakness for the endgame. But okay, still white is better, he has much more space and he continues to play the game. We have rook to d6 going inside, and now rook to d7 isn't an option because rook to e6 comes with a check. We have bishop to d7 and now f4. rook to c8, e5, pawn captures and pawn captures. In the end, Korchnoi managed to get this very weak e6 pawn under the attack, and okay, it's not that easy to capture it because there is this bishop and this king defending it. So he definitely needs to find some other plan how to improve his position. We see rook to c5 by Karpov attacking this pawn, and rook to e1. There is no time to capture on e5 because essentially rook to d7 comes with a check. So it isn't like you have to capture the rook and then black captures your rook and you won a pawn. So this is with check and it doesn't work. So we see h6 and h4. Now expansion on the king side. Rook to a8. The rooks aren't doubled up, so this bishop doesn't have to be defended by the rook. And now rook to e3. We see rook to c6. Once again, Karpov goes for the exchange. But at this point, this is the endgame, and he just wants to calmly finish the game. He would be very happy with the draw because essentially he didn't try anything in this game, and draw is actually the only thing he can hope for. So we have rook to d4, rook to c5, and back rook to d6. Rook to c6, and Korchnoi doesn't want to draw, so he exchanges. Rook captures and bishop captures on c6. And now rook to g3, attacking the pawn on the g7. Rook to g8 defending, and now king to f2. Now Korchnoi does a very, I mean, it was very funny to me to see this in the next couple of moves in this game, because Karpov kind of really allowed it, but essentially there aren't any better moves to play. Now g5 was played, which was actually a very good move, expand on the king side and push the pawns forward. King to e3. g4, so locking the rook here, because if the rook moves and this pawn is undefended, bishop can easily capture it. King to d4 and h5. So now essentially what Karpov has done, he has locked the rook for now, which is a good thing to do. But when the rook moves out, you have once again pawns on the light squares, and your opponent has the light square bishop, so definitely weakness for the endgame. But when you have an approach like this, you definitely should take care of this bishop and this rook not leaving the square, because then you would really want to capture, and then having an open, so a passed g pawn would be quite an advantage. So here the game continues like this: king to c5 attacking, so bishop to e4, and king to b6. So just in a couple of moves, king has come from g1 to b6, and now he is attacking here. So we see rook to a8 defending the pawn, and now the critical moment in the game. Bishop to d3 is played by Korchnoi. And why I say the critical moment in the game? So obviously now is the turning point. Karpov, as a lot of pieces have been exchanged, he now has a chance for a draw. But he really needs to think about it. What is the best approach here? In the end, maybe just looking at the material, yeah, the position is equal. But throughout the game, Korchnoi has played more actively and he has picked up more space. Just looking at this pawn here and this pawn here, it is easy to see that white has a little bit more of a positional advantage. And now it is time to see what is actually the best approach here for black. And here in the game, okay, so let's start off what white is threatening. Of course, picking up the bishop, so you have to move the bishop, but if the bishop moves from this diagonal, then bishop to g6 seems like a serious threat. He will pick up the h5 pawn and he will pick up the g4 pawn, because you cannot defend both things with the rook on h8 and a8, because now the king is on a b6 threatening to capture on a5. So Karpov in this game, in this situation, he played bishop to f5 in order to keep the bishop on this diagonal and still defend everything. But this is actually the wrong move. Even though it's a more natural one, you will really have to think about the coordination between your rook and this bishop, and also the position on the queen side, in order to make the best move here. Actually, the best move here is bishop to d5. And this is a very good position to analyze, because it's a very great study for the endgame. Because now let's see what is actually happening if white plays bishop to g6. Now, okay, so now best course for Karpov is just to continue with the checks. Rook to b8 check. And this is the move you had to have in mind in order to, yeah, just go over the bishop g6 threat. Because what can white do now? Okay, of course he can play king to a7, attack the rook, but this doesn't do anything but leads to perpetual checks. So if you want to draw, this is the way to go. Also, if you play king to c5, black can just continue with the checks. King to c5, king to d4, and now rook to h8. The king isn't on b6, this pawn is safe. So not much to do here. In a sense, sorry for that. King can go back to c5, but then again with the checks, and if the rook moves, bishop comes to g2. So everything is defended, everything is looking fine. So this is again a drawn variation. But what happens if, probably most of you are wondering, what happens if king captures on a5? Now this one is interesting, because now king to d7 comes, and okay, so this pawn is defended, and this king to d7 comes with a very serious threat. King to c6 and king to c5. And it doesn't seem that is very easy for this king to go out. So if bishop captures on h5, we have king to c6, and now look at this. King to c5 cannot be stopped, so there is no check with rook to c3 because of the pawn, or that the rook can go somewhere around to go to pick up the check. Because if you play something like rook to e3, king to c5, and there is this unstoppable rook to a8 checkmate. Not even king to a6 escapes because of this bishop on this diagonal. So what do you have to do is rook to d3, king to c5, and then you have to give up the rook. And this is a clearly win for Karpov in this situation. So picking up the pawn isn't good. What you have to do is rook to e3, king to c6, still going for the threat, and now bishop to e4. Not picking up the pawn, but going for the pawn exchange, for the bishop exchange. King to c5, so threatening checkmate. Bishop to d5 can stop on a8, so this is good. Pawn captures, and now king to a6, going out of the checkmate threat, and now rook to a8 doesn't work because of king to b7. But now there is a different threat. King to d4, rook to e1, and king to c3. And now nothing can stop this pawn going to a queen. So essentially black is winning in this position, and just because he played bishop to g6 after bishop to d5, so moves like king to a7 are stopped with rook to e8. Going in front of this pawn, you will push the pawn. If you get a check, king to b3 as a threat, and then you have two pawns. Essentially, yeah, this is an easy winning game for Karpov. So because of all of this, bishop to g6 isn't a good move here, and also bishop to d5 needs to be played. Okay, of course you have to move the bishop, also capturing here is a threat. But okay, Karpov played bishop to f5. This is why I wanted to stop at this position. Essentially, I would say deserving to play bishop to f5, and it is a natural move. The problem here for Karpov is because the problem for him is that he didn't show anything in this game. And now Korchnoi will punish this. Rook to e3. Now the rook can go out, and this pawn isn't attacked anymore. And now rook to c8, threatening rook to c3, bishop to c4, bishop to c2, threatening rook captures, and now b3, b2, b1, so king to b5 defending on c4, and now rook to a8, defending the pawn. And now white is okay. He plays rook to e2, attacking the bishop, bishop to g6 and g3. There is no hurry. Rook to d2 is the threat, and then rook to d6. Bishop to f5, rook to d2, and bishop to e4. Rook to d6. The rook has infiltrated, and now he will go for this pawn. So Karpov tries an exchange of bishops. Bishop d5, bishop captures, pawn captures, and rook captures. It is a rook endgame. It is an easier endgame than an endgame with the rooks and the bishop. It is a pawn up for white, but also these pawns will fall, so essentially a winning endgame for white. Karpov tries to play it, king to e6 and rook to c5, staying in the defense of this pawn. And now we have rook to a7 first. King to b6 and rook to d7, king to a5, rook to d3, king to b4, and rook to g3. So in the end, Karpov tries to get some counterplay on the king side, but unfortunately for him, he is too slow, because a5 follows, and after rook to g1, now, okay, Korchnoi has multiple options here. Of course, a lot of moves are here winning, and he chooses rook to c2. Also, a6 was possible right away, but he wants to put the rook on the a file, and then but also defend here on the second rank, so when the pawn comes on g2 that he can maybe capture it. If rook to a1 was played, then king to b5 or even rook to e2 is possible. Just having these two pawns is much faster than having this one pawn, because the h-pawn is blocking the black h-pawn. So it doesn't make sense, and Karpov plays g3, we have rook to a2, and now nothing is stopping this pawn to become promoted. Rook to h1, a6, and rook to h4 check. And now this is actually in the final moment where you have to be careful. Do you want to give up the whole advantage from the whole game away, or do you want to be careful in the endgame and play cautiously? Once again, a very good study for the endgame, because now, okay, the king is in check, and for example, if you play king to b5, black has rook to d4. The clear idea is to play rook to d8, and as you can see, white has these two pawns, and the black has these two pawns on the totally opposite side, and playing by playing h4, these pawns are connected and they are safeguarding each other. King can capture on e5, and this is essentially a drawn position, because after a7 and rook to d8, if you promote, rook will sacrifice himself, and after something like h4 and king come closer, essentially this is a drawn game. So you don't want to allow it. Can you play king to c5? Not really, because rook to h2 comes, and if you capture the rook, pawn captures, and black is actually faster to promote, and he will win this game. So you have to move the rook to a1, for example, but then rook to c2, king moves, for example, to d4, and now once again h4, and the threat is not the threat, but the defense is rook to c8 after a7, and once again you can sacrifice your rook for the pawn. Once again, a drawn endgame. So in keeping that in mind, after rook to h4 and having the king here, how do you actually stop both threats? And Korchnoi, of course, finds it. King to c3 is the best move, stopping rook to d4, and stopping, of course, rook to h2 and rook to c2 after that. So this is essentially it. In this position, Karpov played rook to h3, maybe, just maybe, hoping that Korchnoi will allow g2 with check. But Korchnoi plays rook to g2, and in this position Karpov resigned the game. So essentially, yeah, this is a very good show how Karpov played this USSR championship. Not really shown anything. Probably how Tal said it, he was kind of afraid and giving too much respect to his elders and to his much more experienced rivals. But that was a very bad approach, and with coaches in the future, Karpov will actually just move the other side and crush his opponents. And also he will play a very good championship match with Korchnoi in the future. So still unexperienced, definitely wanted to show you this game for two reasons: to see this other side of Karpov. He is not just that guy who moves slowly and then picks up this 0.1 advantage move by move to get to that victory. He is also a guy that can be, I wouldn't say afraid, but let's say unexperienced and not really feeling it every time and in every tournament. So yeah, and also the other thing is you had this very good positions. So two good positions to analyze. So hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something from it. And that being said, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.